Annabelle Flint woke to dust blowing under the sheriff's office door, and a row of townspeople staring through the front window. She had slept on a bench beside the coal stove, still wearing the torn traveling coat that smelled of smoke and medicine. By sunrise, the whole street knew the ruined lady. Doctor had nowhere else to go. The storekeeper laughed that sickness followed women who carried black bags, and his wife pulled her children back as if shame could spread like fever. Deputy Henry Wash stood in the doorway, one hand on his holster, facing a choice: send her out hungry, or see the worth beneath everyone else's contempt. Before we begin, leave your country name below and tell me where this western night is reaching you. Subscribe if stories of rejected brides, protective cowboys, and hard-earned love keep you listening. The first bell of morning had not yet rung from the white church on the hill when Henry Wash found Annabelle Flint asleep in the sheriff's office. He had come in from a night patrol with dust on his shoulders, a rifle scratch across one sleeve, and the hard, quiet look that made drunks step aside before he ever spoke. The town of Mercy Crossing was still gray with dawn. The hitching post stood empty. The windows of Silas Pike's Mercantile were dark. A train whistle cried somewhere beyond the cottonwoods, low and lonely, as if the rails themselves had grief in them. Henry pushed open the office door and stopped. A woman lay curled on the wooden bench beside the stove, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the other wrapped around the handle of a black medical bag. Her brown hair had come loose from its pins. Her boots were dusty. The hem of her dress was torn. Someone had tried to scrub blood from one cuff and failed. For one breath, Henry thought she might be dead. Then her fingers tightened on the bag. He shut the door softly behind him. "Ma'am." Her eyes opened at once, not slowly, not dreamily, but with the sharp fear of someone accustomed to being awakened by danger. She sat up too quickly, knocked her shoulder against the wall, and winced. "I did not steal anything," she said. Henry held still. "I never said you did." She looked around the office as though remembering where she was. A barred cell at the back, a desk with unpaid notices stacked beside an ink bottle, a rifle rack, a wall map, the smell of coffee grounds and coal ash. "I asked Sheriff Creed for permission," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "He said I could sit here until morning. I must have fallen asleep. Sheriff's gone to settle trouble near Broken Spur." Her eyes lowered. "I can leave." Before Henry could answer, the bell over the office door clanged again. Silas Pike stood there in his striped waistcoat, his gray beard trimmed neat and his mouth already bent toward cruelty. "Well," Silas said loudly, turning so his voice carried into the street, "Mercy Crossing wakes with a surprise. The ruined doctor has taken lodging with the law." Annabelle rose, but hunger made her sway. Henry stepped forward. "Careful, Pike." Silas smiled. "Careful is what this town ought to be. A woman driven out of Abilene with a death attached to her name should not be sleeping under the sheriff's roof." Annabelle's face went white. The street had begun to gather. A laundress with a basket. Two boys pretending not to stare. Mrs. Caldwell from the church, gloved hands stiff at her waist. Mr. Hobb, the undertaker, watching with the patient interest of a man who profited from endings. Henry had seen men bleed without making a sound. He had seen thieves cry when rope touched their wrists, but the look on Annabelle Flint's face angered him more than any gunfight. She did not weep. She did not defend herself. She simply stood there, clutching that battered medical bag, as if it were the last proof that she had once belonged to herself. Silas took another step into the office. "I heard the story plain. She cheated a rancher's wife. Woman died before sundown. And this one vanished before questions could be asked. Folks call that guilt," Annabelle whispered. "I did not vanish, no." Silas raised his brows. "Then why sleep in the sheriff's office like a vagrant?" Henry moved between them. "That's enough." Silas looked up at him, amused. "Deputy Wash, you planning to arrest me for telling truth?" "I'm planning to throw you into the street for enjoying it." The amusement faded. The townspeople outside drew closer. Annabelle spoke then, quiet but steady. I came to answer the notice for a physician. The one posted 3 months ago. Mrs. Caldwell sniffed. We asked for a doctor. Not a scandal. A hungry woman is not a scandal, Henry said. Silas' mouth tightened. You always were soft beneath that bash. The words found old bone. Henry's face did not change, but something in his eyes went colder. I said enough. Silas stepped backward, hands lifted, but his smile returned as soon as he reached the boardwalk. Mercy Crossing can decide for itself what kind of woman it welcomes. The crowd thinned in murmurs. Curtains stirred. Doors shut. The street returned to morning, but the judgment stayed behind like dust. Annabelle bent to retrieve a small parcel from beneath the bench. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string. When she lifted it, the paper sagged. Empty, Henry noticed. When did you last eat? She did not answer. That is an answer. I have money coming, she said. A trunk, papers, instruments. They were delayed at the rail office. Delayed or taken? She looked at him then, and he saw she had been holding herself upright, by will alone. Does it matter? It does to me. The words surprised them both. Outside, a horse stamped. Somewhere, a hammer started up at the livery. Morning had fully entered Mercy Crossing, and with it the town's appetite for talk. Annabelle buttoned her torn coat. I will not trouble your office further. She stepped toward the door, but her knees betrayed her. Henry caught her before she hit the floor. She weighed almost nothing. For a fierce cowboy deputy who had faced rustlers, winter raids, and a lonely house for too many years, Henry Walsh found himself holding a ruined doctor in the middle of the sheriff's office, while the town watched through glass, and his heart broke before he could stop it. Henry carried Annabelle through the rear door of the sheriff's office, away from the windows. She stirred when cold air touched her face. Put me down, she murmured. When you can stand, I can stand. You just proved otherwise. Behind the office stood a narrow yard, a water barrel, and the deputy's horse tied beneath a cottonwood. Henry shifted her carefully, trying not to notice how tightly she held the medical bag, even half fainting. My bag, she said, in your hand. My papers, ladder. She opened her eyes. You do not understand. Without them, I am only what they say I am. Henry looked toward the street, where Silas Pike's voice was already carrying from one porch to another. No, he said. You are what you do next. He took her to the small room behind the jail, where Sheriff Creed kept spare blankets and old coffee tins. It had a cot, a cracked wash basin, and a window facing the alley. Henry set her down there and brought water. She drank with both hands around the tin cup. Slow, he said. I know how to drink water. I figure. You know a lot of things and forgot some of them on account of starving. A hint of color rose in her cheeks. Deputy Walsh, I am grateful for the water. I do not need pity. Good. I'm poor at it. That almost earned him a smile, almost. He left her with a blanket and went to the cafe. The widow who owned it, Hattie Bell, was sweeping crumbs from the floor when he entered. You look like storm weather, she said. I need breakfast, bread, eggs, coffee, something with strength in it. For you, for the woman at the jail. Hattie paused. The doctor, you heard already. This town can hear a shameful thing through 3 walls and a thunderstorm. She set the broom aside. I'll pack it. When Henry returned, Annabelle was standing at the basin, washing the dried blood from her cuff. He placed the food on the crate. He ate. She stared at it. I will pay you back. I did not ask. He still will. Fine. She sat slowly. Pride kept her movements careful, but hunger won. She ate the eggs first, then half the bread, then stopped as if ashamed of needing more. Henry turned toward the window so she could finish without being watched. After a while, she said, It was not patient's blood. He glanced back. On my sleeve. It was from a man on the train. He cut his hand loading fray. I stitched it. That why your own trunk got delayed. That is why I missed the porter calling for baggage. When I returned, my trunk was gone. Name on it. Dr. Annabelle Flint. The word doctor came out softly, not proud, not pleading, simply true. Henry leaned against the doorframe. A woman with a medical degree makes people nervous. A poor woman with one makes them angry. He understood that more than he wanted to. Henry Walsh had grown up in a sod house with a leaking roof and a mother who mended flour sacks into shirts. Mercy Crossing respected his badge now, but some of its older citizens still remembered the barefoot boy who had stolen turnips one winter after his father drank away the seed money. Respect, he knew, was a coat Towns gave a man only after making him freeze without it. Before he could answer, the front door slammed. Deputy! Henry cursed under his breath and stepped out. A boy of about 8 stood in the office, breathing hard, straw-colored hair stuck to his forehead. "It's Ruthie," the boy said. "She fell at the livery. Mr. Dake says her arm's bent wrong." Henry's face changed. Annabelle noticed. "Your child?" she asked from the back room. "My niece," he said. "My sister's girl." He was already reaching for his hat when Annabelle picked up her bag. "I will come. You can barely stand. I am a doctor." The words left no room for argument. They hurried to the livery with the boy running ahead. Dust rose around their boots. The whole street watched again, but this time Annabelle did not look left or right. Inside the livery, horses shifted in their stalls. A little girl sat on a feed sack, white-faced, holding her arm against her chest. She had dark eyes like Henry, and the same stubborn sat to her chin. "Uncle Henry," she whispered. He knelt in the straw. "I'm here, Ruth." Annabelle crouched beside the child. "My name is Annabelle." I see." Ruthie looked at Henry. He nodded once. Annabelle's hands were gentle, but her voice was firmer than anyone expected from such a weary woman. She asked where it hurt. She checked the pulse at the wrist. She sent the stableman for clean boards, cloth, and boiled water. When Ruthie began to cry, Annabelle did not hush her. "Crying is honest," she said. "You might cry and still be brave." Henry looked away. No one had said such a thing to him when he was small. The bone was not broken through, but badly set from the fall. Annabelle worked with calm precision. She had Henry hold Ruthie still, then counted softly. On 3, she pulled and aligned the arm. Ruthie screamed once, and Henry's jaw clenched so tight, a muscle jumped in his cheek. Then it was done. Annabelle splinted the arm and tied the cloth. "She needs rest. No climbing, no carrying pails. If fever comes, send for me, Mr. Dake." The stableman shifted uneasily. "Send where?" The question hung over them all. Annabelle lowered her hands. Henry stood. "To my place," he said. Annabelle turned sharply. "Deputy Walsh, my sister's old cabin is empty behind the barn. Roof holds. Stove works. You can stay there until your trunk comes." Whispers moved through the livery door, where half the town pretended not to listen. Silas Pike's voice rose from outside. "A single woman under a deputy's roof. That'll improve her reputation." Henry walked to the doorway. The crowd quieted. "She set a child's arm while you all stood around measuring her worth," he said. "Anyone has more to say can say it to me." No one did. Annabelle stood behind him, pale and proud and trembling from exhaustion. Ruthie reached out with her good hand and caught the edge of Annabelle's sleeve. "Will it hurt forever?" Annabelle looked down and something soft entered her face. "No," she said, "not forever." Henry heard the words and felt, without knowing why, that she was speaking to herself too. The cabin behind Henry Walsh's barn had once belonged to his sister, Margaret. After she died of lung fever, Henry locked the door and told himself the place was only wood and nails. But when he brought Annabelle there that afternoon, he found a room full of things he had not been brave enough to remember. A blue cup on the shelf, a cracked rocking chair, a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, dried lavender tied near the window, brittle now and gray with dust. Annabelle stood just inside the doorway. "I cannot take this room from your family. No one's using it." That does not mean no one feels it. Henry looked at her, then at the quilt. My niece won't come in here. Says it smells like missing someone. Annabelle touched the doorframe with careful fingers. It does. He set a sack of flour, beans, coffee, and bacon on the table. There's water at the pump. Wood stacked along the wall. Don opened the west window during wind. It jams. You give instructions like a man expecting to leave. I am deputy. I leave often and return. Henry's face closed a little. So far, that evening, Annabelle made soup from beans, bacon, and a handful of onions Hattie Bell sent over, without admitting kindness. Henry expected her to eat alone. Instead, she carried a bowl to the porch where Ruthie sat with her splinted arm and a scowl. You look angry, Annabelle said. I hate being told not to climb. That is sensible. Being told what not to do is often tiresome. Ruthie eyed her. Did you climb when you were little? Trees, fences, once a church bell rope. Ruthie's mouth opened. You? I was not born wearing spectacles and carrying a medical bag. Henry, listening from the barn, nearly smiled. In the days that followed, the town tried to make Annabelle invisible, but sickness and injury kept finding her. A ranch hand came with a nail through his boot. A farmer's wife brought a baby with a cough. Old Mr. Hobb pretended he only had indigestion until Annabelle told him graves were poor places for stubborn men. Even those who doubted her came after sunset, slipping through Henry's back gate as though healing were a crime. Annabelle treated them all and kept a little notebook of debts. Beside most names she wrote paid in eggs, paid in mending, paid in future if able. Henry saw the list one night when he delivered lantern oil. You'll starve running a practice like that. She closed the notebook. A person cannot heal if they are too ashamed to ask. That from a medical book? No, Don. From life. He had no answer. Trust did not grow between them as a sudden fire. It grew like bread rising under cloth, quiet and patient, needing warmth more than flame. Henry fixed the cabin's west window. Annabelle cleaned Margaret's old cup and placed wildflowers in it. Ruthie came daily, at first to complain, then to listen, then to sit on the steps while Annabelle mixed salves from yarrow and comfrey. One morning, a colt gashed its flank on broken wire. Henry had planned to shoot the animal if the wound turned foul. Annabelle followed him into the corral with her sleeves rolled up. I work on people, she said, but flesh is flesh. The colt fought hard. Henry held the rope while Annabelle cleaned the wound. Dust rose around them. The sun burned white overhead. The animal trembled, and so did Annabelle's arms by the end, but her hands never turned careless. When it was done, she leaned against the fence, breathing hard. Henry handed her a canteen. You saved him. We do not know that yet. You gave him a chance. She drank, then looked at the coat. Sometimes that is all medicine is. Henry watched her face, the weary shadows beneath her eyes, the plain brown dress mended at cuff and hem, the stubborn tenderness she tried to hide behind usefulness. Mercy Crossing had called her ruin because rumor was easier than mercy. Henry had begun to suspect the town had mistaken ruin for survival. That evening, church bells rang for Wednesday prayer. Annabelle stayed on the cabin porch while the sound rolled across the prairie. Henry came from the barn carrying a small wooden crate. Your trunk did not come, he said, but the station master found this. Inside were 3 medical books, a cracked jar of carbolic, and a framed certificate bent at one corner. Annabelle took the certificate with both hands. Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. Annabelle Ruth Flint, Doctor of Medicine. Henry read it without touching. Looks real enough. It is real. I believed you before. She looked up at him. The porch lantern softened the hard lines of his face. He was not a handsome man in the easy way. Weather had carved him. Silence had settled deep in him, but there was a steadiness there that made a person feel less likely to fall. Why? She asked. Henry looked toward the barn, where Ruthie was singing nonsense to the injured colt. Because a liar usually wants to be admired. You only wanted to work. The words struck something tender in her. She lowered the certificate quickly, but he saw her eyes shine. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. After a moment, she said, "You keep people at a distance, Deputy Wash. So do you, Dr. Flint." "I have reasons." "So do I." The prairie wind moved through the grass beyond the barn. The house windows glowed. For the first time since arriving in Mercy Crossing, Annabelle felt the possibility of staying rise inside her, small and dangerous. Then a rider appeared on the road at dusk. He wore a fine black coat unsuited to frontier dust and rode a bay horse with silver on the bridle. He stopped before Henry's gate and removed his hat, as though entering a parlor. Annabelle's face drained of color. Henry saw it. "You know him." She folded the certificate against her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "Dr. Leland Price." The rider smiled from the gate. "Annabelle," he called, "you have been very difficult to find." Leland Price entered Mercy Crossing like a man certain the town had been waiting for him. By noon the next day, he had taken a room above Silas Pike's mercantile, shaken hands with the bear, praised the church steeple, and told 3 different groups of citizens that he had come only from a Christian duty to prevent further tragedy. He was handsome in a polished way, with dark hair combed smooth, gloves too clean for the street, and a physician's confidence worn like a medal. He spoke gently. That made the poison travel farther. Annabelle did not go into town that morning. She stayed at a cabin grinding dried willow bark, her movements precise, her face still. Henry came at midday and found Ruthie sitting on the steps, silent. "Where's Dr. Flint?" "Inside." He knocked. Annabelle answered with her sleeves rolled down in her backpack. Henry looked at the bag. "Going somewhere?" "I should." "That wasn't my question." She stepped aside, and he entered. The cabin was neater than when he had given it to her. Too neat now. The bed smooth, the cup washed, the books stacked. A room being erased. "Price came to the office," Henry said. "Claims you owe him money." "I do." "Claims you ran from an inquiry." "I left before he could turn lies into law." Henry waited. Annabelle sat at the table. For a long moment, the only sound was wind pushing dust against the wall. "In Abilene, I worked beside him," she said. "He had a proper practice, wealthy patients, influence. I had women who came through the back door because they could not afford him. One night, Mrs. Eliza Harrow was brought to me in labor. Her husband had already paid Dr. Price, but he did not come. He was at supper with investors." Her hands curled. "I did what I could. The child lived. Eliza did not." Henry removed his hat slowly. "Price blamed you. He had given her laudanum earlier. Too much. I found the bottle. I confronted him." Her voice hardened for the first time. "He said no one would believe a plain woman doctor with deaths and second-hand instruments over him." Henry's jaw tightened. "He offered to make it disappear if I married him." The cabin seemed to darken. Annabelle looked at the window. "I refused." The next morning, there were whispers that I had misjudged the birth, that I practiced beyond my learning, that I stole medicines. My patients stopped coming. My landlord locked my room. Men I had treated crossed the street rather than greet me. "And your papers?" "Some remained in my trunk. Some he kept. Letters, accounts, proof." Henry paced once, then stopped himself. "You should have told Sheriff Creed. I have told men in offices before. They asked whether I had encouraged Dr. Price's affection, whether I was jealous, whether a woman's mind was steady enough for surgical work." Henry had no clean words for the anger in him. As sunset, the town meeting was called in the church hall. Annabelle went because running would prove the lie. Henry walked beside her down the center street. The town watched from porches, windows, hitching rails. Silas Pike stood outside the mercantile with Dr. Price at his side, both men wearing the same mild smile. Inside the hall, lanterns burned yellow. The pews filled. Annabelle sat in front with her hands folded over her back. Henry stood against the wall near the door. bass catching the light. Matt Caldwell cleared his throat. We are gathered to decide whether Miss Flint may practice medicine in Mercy Crossing. Dr. Flint, Henry said. The owl flushed. Dr. Flint, if proper proof is supplied. Price rose with a sigh that sounded almost sorrowful. I wish to say I hold no bitterness toward Annabelle. She is intelligent, determined, but determination without temperance can endanger lives. In Abilene, a woman died under her care. A murmur passed through the room. Annabelle stood. Eliza Harrow died after you dosed her with laudanum and left her unattended. Price looked wounded. My dear Annabelle, grief has twisted your memory. Henry saw her flinch at my dear. Silas Pike rose next. I have also received word from the rail office. A trunk bearing her name was found opened, with unpaid freight charges and questionable contents. Until debts are paid, it remains hell. Annabelle turned. You have my trunk? Silas spread his hands. The railman brought it to me for safekeeping. I am a bonded merchant. You opened it. To you identify ownership. My instruments were inside, and debts attached. Henry stepped forward. How much? Silas named a sum 3 times any honest charge. Ruthie, seated with Hattie Bell, whispered, "That's stealing." Half the church heard. Silas reddened. Price lifted a folded paper. Furthermore, I have here a statement from Abilene questioning whether Miss Flint should be trusted with patients until formal review. Annabelle stared at the paper. That is not from the board. It is from men of standing, men who owed you favors. The eye banged his gavel. Enough. A vote was called, not to jail her, not to drive her out, only to forbid her from treating any citizen until her credentials and reputation were settled. It was a quieter cruelty, and therefore easier for respectable people to approve. When they left the hall, Annabelle walked without speaking. The church bell above them shifted in the wind, but did not ring. At Henry's gate, she stopped. I will leave before dawn. No, you cannot fight a whole town for a woman you scarcely know. Henry looked at the cabin, at the lantern in its window, at Ruthie's small shape waiting on the porch. I know enough. You know what I show you. That's more than most folks ever show. She shook her head. Henry, do not make me another burden you carry, because you lost someone. His face went still. Annabelle regretted at once, but Henry only said, My sister died because no doctor would ride 12 miles in a storm for a poor widow and her child. I buried her at sunrise. Ruthie was 4. I don't help you because I lost Margaret. I help you because Mercy Crossing is about to repeat the sin that killed her. Annabelle's eyes filled. He softened his voice. Stay one more day. One day will not change them. No, Henry said, but it might give me time to find something that will. Henry rode before dawn. He left Ruthie with Hattie Bell, took his fastest horse, and carried Annabelle's certificate wrapped in oilcloth inside his coat. The nearest telegraph office, willing to send inquiries east without Silas Pike's interference, was 40 miles away at Larimore Junction. It meant rough country, a river crossing, and a day away from Mercy Crossing. While Price held the town by the ear, Annabelle begged him not to go. He went anyway. By mid-morning, Price visited the cabin. Annabelle did not invite him in. She stood on the porch with her medical bag at her feet. You always did choose stubborn men, Price said. Leave. I came to help you. You came to finish what you started. His pleasant expression thinned. You are tired, Annabelle. Poor. Alone. This town will not keep you. Walsh cannot marry every stray his conscience drags home. She looked past him toward the road, refusing to show how the words struck. Price stepped closer. Come back with me. Sign a statement admitting confusion in the Harrow case. I will settle your debts. I will say your nerves were overtaxed and recommend rest. You may assist in my practice quietly. Assist. You must see reason. You were never made for standing alone. Annabelle picked up her bag. I was made by standing alone. His face hardened. Before he could answer, the church bell began to ring wildly. Not for worship, not for wedding. Alarm. Annabelle ran. Smoke rose from the far end of town where Silas Pick's storage shed stood beside the mercantile. Men shouted. Horses reared. A team had bolted, overturned a wagon, and knocked a lantern into spilled coal oil. Flames crawled up the shed wall and leaped toward the dry roof. A boy lay in the street. Silas Pike's nephew, Caleb, 12 years old, pinned beneath a broken wagon board. People surrounded him, but no one knew what to do. Price arrived moments after Annabelle, breathing hard, his black coat dusty. Move back, he ordered. Give me room. The boy screamed when Price touched the board. Annabelle dropped to her knees. His leg is trapped. Do not pull upward. Price glared. You are forbidden to practice. You pull upward, bone will tear through. The crowd froze. Silas Pike rushed forward, face gray. Save him. Somebody save him. Price's hands hovered. Uncertain, Annabelle looked to Silas. Get water, clean cloth, a saw if the board would not lift, and men steady enough not to panic. Silas stared at her. Now, she snapped. The command broke the spell. Men moved. Hattie Bell brought cloth from the cafe. Ruthie came carrying Annabelle's instrument roll, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. They said you couldn't, Ruthie whispered. Annabelle took the roll. Today they are wrong. The fire spread behind them. Sparks lifted into the bright sky. Someone shouted that the mercantile would go next. Annabelle worked in the street while smoke thickened. She directed 2 men to lift the board at an angle. She had another brace, Caleb's hip. She pressed cloth against the wound before blood could frighten a crowd into uselessness. When Price reached in to take over, she caught his wrist. Wash your hands. His eyes flashed. Around them, the town watched. Price stepped back. Annabelle set the bone enough to move the boy, bound the wound, and ordered him carried to the church hall, where there was space and shade. Silas followed, shaking. At the hall doors, he caught Annabelle's sleeve. My nephew, he said. Will he lose the leg? Not if fever stays away. His mouth trembled. I said things. I did not know. You did not want to. She went inside. For hours, she fought to keep Caleb alive. Price lingered, trying twice to contradict her, but each time fear in the room turned toward Annabelle instead. People who had voted against her brought hot water, clean sheets, lamp oil, coffee. The same women who had pulled children away now stood waiting for her instructions. Near dusk, Henry returned. His horse was lathered white. His hat was gone. A cut marked his temple where a low branch, or worse, had found him. He dismounted before the church hall and nearly fell, but caught the rail. Annabelle came out to meet him, her apron stained, her hands raw from washing. You're hurt, S-O-R-U. That is not an answer. He took papers from inside his coat. Rain had touched the oilcloth, but not soaked through. Telegraph, replies from Pennsylvania. Copy of your graduation record. Letter from Abelin's apothecary. Price purchased 3 times the laudanum he entered in his books. Harrow case included. Annabelle stared at the papers. You rode all that way. Wasn't far. You are bleeding. Tree disagreed. A sound half laugh, half sob escaped her. Henry's expression gentle, but only for a second. Then he looked through the hall doors and saw Silas Pike standing beside Caleb's cot, hat crushed in his hands. What happened? Fire. Caleb was hurt, and Price. Annabelle's face changed. What? She searched the street. Dr. Leland Price was gone. So was Annabelle's medical trunk, which Silas had finally brought from the mercantile and set inside the hall. Henry turned toward the livery, already understanding. But the gunshot came first. It cracked from the alley behind the mercantile. Then, another. Henry ran toward the sound. Annabelle followed despite him, shouting her name. Behind the store, Price had Silas Pike by the collar and a pistol in his hand. The open trunk lay in the dirt. Medical instruments glinted in the fading light. Papers scattered in the wind. "I will not be ruined by a woman," Price snarled. Henry drew his revolver. "Let him go." Price swung the pistol toward Annabelle instead. "You should have married me." Henry stepped between them. The shot tore through the air. Henry fired once. Price dropped his pistol and fell against the water barrel, clutching his shoulder. For one stunned moment, no one moved. Then Annabelle pushed past Henry. "Don't," he said. She knelt beside Price anyway. "He might die. He tried to kill you, and I am still a doctor." Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. Henry stood guard in the alley, while Annabelle saved the man who had tried to destroy her. In that dusty place behind the Mercantile, with smoke still rising and townspeople gathering, Mercy Crossing saw the difference between reputation and character laid bare. By midnight, Caleb's fever had not risen. Price was locked in the sheriff's cell with his shoulder bandaged. Silas Pike signed a statement confessing he had held Annabelle's trunk and opened it at Price's urging. The town did not sleep. Neither did Annabelle. Morning came clean after the fire, with a kind of pale gold light that made even a damaged street look forgiven. The church hall doors stood open. Caleb Pike slept beneath a quilt, his legs splinted, his breathing even. Silas sat beside him, older by 10 years than he had been the day before. Every now and then, he looked toward Annabelle, as if trying to find words large enough to cross what he had done. He found only small ones. "Dr. Flint," he said when she checked Caleb's bandage. Money. More than money." "Yes," Annabelle said. He swallowed. "I will pay both." She met his eyes. "Begin by telling the truth loudly enough for the people who heard the lie." By 10 o'clock, nearly all of Mercy Crossing had gathered in the street. Sheriff Amos Creed had returned in the night and listened to Henry's report with a face like carved oak. Now he stood on the steps of his office with the yell. Henry, Silas Pike, and Annabelle. Price, pale and furious, sat inside the jail with his bandaged arm in a sling. His fine coat hung torn from one shoulder. Without polish, he looked smaller. The bear cleared his throat. After review of documents received by Deputy Walsh, statements from Mr. Pike, and evidence recovered from Dr. Price effects, this town recognizes Dr. Annabelle Flint as a trained and lawful physician. No one cheered at first. Shame is slower than judgment. Then Hattie Bell clapped once. Ruthie clapped next. The sound spread until it filled the street. Annabelle stood very still. Ma Caldwell turned to her. His wife stood behind him, eyes lowered. "Dr. Flint," he said, "Mercy Crossing was wrong. The words were not enough. They could not return the nights she had slept hungry. The doors closed against her. The years Price had stolen from her name. But they were public, and they were true, and truth spoken in daylight has weight." Annabelle nodded. "I accept the town's need for a doctor," she said. "I do not yet accept its apology. That will require time and conduct." Henry's mouth almost curved. Sheriff Creed coughed into his fist to hide his own smile. Silas stepped forward, hat in hand. "I will give the east room of the Mercantile for a clinic," he said. "Rent-free for 1 year." Annabelle looked at him. "Rent-fair for 1 year," she corrected. "Charity can become another chain." Silas bowed his head. "Fair, then." The crowd parted when Henry came down the steps. His temple was bandaged, his badge scratched from the alley fight. He stopped beside Annabelle, not touching her, not claiming any right to her victory. "You did it," he said quietly. She looked at the street, at the faces that had once stared through the sheriff's office window. "We did part of it." "No, I rode. You stayed." Her composure faltered. The next weeks remade Mercy Crossing slowly. Annabelle opened her clinic in the east room of the Mercantile. Silas Pike swept the floor himself the first morning and nailed a painted sign above the door. "Dr. Annabelle Flint, physician." He made the letters plain and large enough to be seen from the far hitching post. Patients came first from necessity, then from trust. Babies were born. Fevers broke. Broken fingers were set, old wounds were cleaned. Annabelle kept her ledger, but more names now had coins beside them, and those that did not were no longer ashamed. Ruthie's arm healed straight. The injured colt lived and followed Annabelle along the fence, as if she had personally negotiated with death on his behalf. Hattie Bell sent pies to the clinic and claimed they were extras. Sheriff Creed pretended not to notice Henry walking past the mercantile 5 times a day on official business that fooled no one. Yet Henry said nothing of love. Annabelle understood silence. She had lived inside it. But his silence was not indifference. It was fear wearing duty's coat. One evening, after the first frost silvered the grass, she found him repairing a latch at her clinic door. The latch was fine, she said. It stuck. It did not. Might have someday. She leaned against the doorframe. Henry Walsh, are you planning to fix every hinge in town before speaking plainly? He stilled. The street was quiet. A lantern burned inside the clinic. From the church, choir practice drifted faintly through the cold. Henry set down the screwdriver. I don't have much to offer. You have a house, a niece, 2 stubborn horses, and a habit of bleeding for causes. I mean, the kind of things a woman should have. Do not tell me what a woman should have. I have been told enough. He looked at her then. I buried most of my wanting with Margaret, he said. After my sister died, I kept Ruthie alive and called that enough. Then I found you on that bench in the sheriff's office, holding your bag like the world had taken everything but your purpose. Annabelle's eyes softened. My heart broke, he said. Not because you were weak, because you were so tired and still ready to stand. She stepped closer. What do you want now? His voice roughened. To be the place you can rest without losing yourself. The words entered her quietly and stayed. She reached for his hand. Then speak to Sheriff Creed. Henry blinked. About what? A marriage license, unless fierce deputies in Mercy Crossing court women by fixing latches forever. For the first time since she had known him, Henry Walsh laughed fully. They married in the white church on a Sunday with Prairie wind shaking the windows and Ruthie standing between them, holding both their hands as if making certain neither could escape happiness. Annabelle wore a simple cream dress Hattie Bell altered by lamplight. Henry wore his best black coat, brushed clean twice, and still marked faintly at one cuff from old work. Silas Pike sat in the back pew, head bowed. Mrs. Caldwell brought flowers and said only, "They're from my garden, doctor," which was wiser than another apology. Afterward, there was food behind the church, biscuits, ham, apple preserves, coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. Ranch hands who once doubted Annabelle lined up to shake her hand. Mothers brought children to meet the Dr. Bry, and Ruthie corrected every one of them. She was the doctor first. That evening, after the guests had gone and the lanterns burned low, a rider came hard from the north road. His wife was in labor too early, frightened and bleeding. Annabelle looked at Henry. He was already saddling the horse. They rode through wind and darkness, reached the cabin beyond Miller Creek, and worked until dawn. Henry boiled water, held lamps, soothed the husband, and did whatever Annabelle asked without needing praise. The baby came small but crying. The mother lived. By the time they returned to Mercy Crossing, sunrise had touched the sheriff's office windows. Annabelle meant only to stop there and report the birth for the county book. Henry went to stable the horses. Sheriff Creed was away. The office was warm, the stove banked, the same bench standing beside it. Annabelle sat for one moment, then exhaustion claimed her. Henry came in carrying 2 cups of coffee and found her asleep on the sheriff's office bench, her head pillowed on her folded coat, one hand resting on the black medical bag. Dust shone in the morning light. Outside, townspeople passed the window, but no one stared with contempt now. A woman tipped her hat. A boy removed his cap. Silas Pike paused, saw her sleeping there, and quietly turned the sign on his mercantile door so no bell would wake her. Henry stood in the doorway, just as he had on the first morning. Only everything had changed. The ruined doctor the town had shamed was now the woman who had saved its children, guarded its mothers, humbled its proud men, and taught a lonely deputy that love was not another loss waiting to happen. Ruthie slipped in behind him and whispered, "Is that Annabelle all right?" Henry looked at Annabelle's tired face, at the loose curl against her cheek, at the bag she no longer clutched like a shield, but touched like an old companion. "She's home," he said. Annabelle stirred at his voice. Her eyes opened, and for one breath, the old fear crossed them. Then she saw Henry, Ruthie, the warm stove, the sunlight, and the office that had once held her shame. Her hand reached for his. He took it. Outside, the church bell rang the hour. Horses moved along the street. The train whistle sounded far away, carrying strangers toward new chances and old wounds. But inside the sheriff's office, Henry Walsh knelt beside the bench where he had first found Annabelle Flint, broken by judgment and fierce with survival. This time, his heart broke open not from pity, but from gratitude. And when he helped her rise, he did not rescue a ruined woman. He walked home beside his wife,